floor. So, guys, your mics are all open. Andy, I might go from that side over.
Yeah, hi. I realised that I didn't have the beautiful native woodland or rainforest as my panel members also do. But if you were to pick, so that forestry that I planted, that's 9 months old. So you'll see more grass and flowers than you see the tiny trees. But a year before that, that was tightly grazed, full of cattle. So to have it go from that to where it is now is actually, you know, it's not native woodland, but I believe it's better for biodiversity than what was. So I'll pass it on.
Lovely, thank you, Andy. So then Caroline, anything you'd like to add to your video?
Yeah, just to talk about councils, planners, and their lack of care of woodlands, and you know, the lack of care of trees in towns. So I'm in an urban setting, so a lot of it was based on agriculture, forestry in a rural setting. But our urban trees and our urban woodlands are just as vital for native wildlife connections. You know, a lot of the time now I talk about is habitats and wildlife connections, and that's just as important in a city, because wildlife's trying to get through the cities as well, and people seem to forget that. And every time you hear a conversation, it's usually about rural stuff, obviously, because there's a lot more money involved in rural biodiversity. But in cities, it's just as important. And COVID has taught us that in large built-up areas, it's vital that we have nature to turn to, because it was the last thing we'd left. So people remember that this Citizens' Assembly is actually about biodiversity loss and how do we stop it.
Thank you, Caroline. And we actually have a section on urban landscapes in the next weekend. We're going to be looking at that directly. And Owen, anything to add to your video?
Yes, absolutely. I think if we're talking about the loss of biodiversity in Ireland, and I would, instead of using the word loss, I would use the word hemorrhage, because we're hemorrhaging nature in this country. Ireland is one of the most nature-depleted countries on the planet, and that is not an exaggeration. So if we're talking about how we reverse that collapse, we have to take as our starting the point in understanding how we got here, the fact that if you go back into prehistory, at one point in time, 100% of this island was covered in wild natural habitat. We're probably down, in terms of woodland, natural forest, we're probably down to around 1% now, or just above. Now, add in the other bits of natural habitat you've got here and there, you go up a little bit, but not by a whole lot. Get in a car and drive across Ireland or fly across Ireland, you see an endless stretch of fields with bits of Sitka plantations in between and bits of sheep-bared uplands. These are biodiversity deserts. There's almost nothing there. In between, you've got bits and pieces of hedgerows. They're being rolled up. It's estimated at the rate of up to 6,000 linear kilometres per year in this country. We're wiping out even the tiny little bits we have left. Our national parks, like Killarney National Park, are in a state of complete ecological meltdown. We could not be in a worse position in this country as regards biodiversity and nature. And if we're talking about solutions, there's one thing that we need to be talking about above all else, and I haven't really heard it mentioned, and that's rewilding. If you imagine that we were in Brazil and a tropical rainforest was cut down and cows were stuck on the pasture that resulted, or a eucalyptus plantation of one species of tree, and then we had a Citizens' Assembly on biodiversity loss, at which we talked about how we can make those cattle pastures a little bit better for this butterfly or that moth, or our eucalyptus plantations a little bit better. We might as well not be here. You need to be talking about how can we bring that tropical rainforest back, or else what's the point? And it's essentially the same here in Ireland. Our wild natural habitats have been practically almost completely obliterated, and we need to be talking about bringing them back. And there's one way we can do that that's fair for everybody, and that's by making the farm subsidies criteria, opening them up so farmers like me have the option of being paid to rewild their land just as they are to farm it.
Thank you.
And that is the one measure I would be suggesting.
Thank you. I'm not trying to cut you off. I just want to make sure we get to the questions as well. But I do think that's a theme that we've heard from the farmers too, not to put a limit onto the amount. So let's open the floor, and I just want to see hands. And if you're not happy putting up your hands, tell your facilitator put up your hand for you. Emma's in straight away, table 2.
Hiya. We have a question, probably mainly for Caroline. And we would like to know, how can policy support activists working to preserve woodlands, and is there any preservation orders that could be applied for?
Well, I'll just take what I know, which is Galway City Council. We have the policies, we have everything we need to save the woodland. But what happens is councillors will put in either specific zoning or rezoning and ignore those policies, so in a development plan stage, which then leaves us to think, oh, the planners might actually do the job and say that goes against the policies of a development plan here. But that doesn't happen. Planning, it may get approved. So then it's left to the communities to stand up and do the job that the planners should have done and object to it. So although the policies and procedures are there, they're being ignored by the councillors and by the planners. And that's my experience of it. And so something this Citizens Assembly could do is to strengthen those those things that they have to. They say it's a democratic right to rezone land. Yes, it is. But if there is land that needs protecting, wherever it is, protect it and make it sacrosanct, especially in a time of a biodiversity crisis.
Thank you, Caroline. And great question from 2. And 13, is it? Yeah, 13, yeah.
Hi, my name is Liam. I'm just wondering that Sitka spruce keeps coming up as maybe a problem species in forestry. And I'm just wondering, is there any research or comparable species to Sitka spruce for forest or timber production and uses? And I'm not sure if it's for the front or the back. If that's possible.
Or both. Thanks, Liam.
Or both.
Andy, can I throw it to you first anyway?
Yeah, I mean, we only recently planted, so I can just pass on what we ended up making our decision on. And so basically we went with a private forestry company, and they come to you, they map out your land, they take out the archaeological and environmental areas of special protection. So, you have to follow regulations around all that. And then they analyze the type of soil you have. Is it north aspect, south aspect, what kind of sunlight? And based on all of those inputs, including how well it drains, is it peaty, is it acidic, they'll come up with what trees have the best chance of living. So, for example, our native species we settled on was oak and birch, but the rest is Sitka. Why? Because it can survive. We have underneath that soil, there's about this much soil, it's all rock face. And it can grow on severe inclines and rocky and outblown outcrops. So essentially, if you don't, so the rules are when you're choosing what mix of forestry to put, because there's different options. You can do 20, 80, 50, 100% of either native or the other. But you have to choose what will survive, because in the 4th or 5th year, when you get inspected by the Department of Agriculture, if more than 10% hasn't survived, you're penalised financially. So you end up with this very fast growing, it's even been called invasive by some. But I mean, perhaps there could be more knowledge from Quilcha as well, or other speakers before me, that could balance out the other end of that. That's just basically how we ended up with the choice that we made.
Thanks, Andy. I'm actually going to keep the questions to here for now. So Stephen is here on 3, and we've got Louise on 7, and then I'll come over to 5. So, okay, loads of hands up again, which is great. We'll go to table 3 first.
Stephen here. Just as we're on 3's, a suggestion, as we are a citizens' assembly, would it be possible that at the end of our work, that somewhere we might plant a few trees and have it there as a remembrance of the work that the 100 people do? Maybe someone might sponsor it, or we could get assistance from someone. It's just a suggestion.
It's a great suggestion, and it seems to have support in the room, Stephen, so let's come back to that. And I think it's a great idea, a lovely idea, a longevity to the Assembly. Louise is behind you on table 7. Connor, thank you.
It's Louise. This is for Owen. We were wondering what financial support is available to help you manage your land, and was it on your own initiative, or were you given support to start out? Thank you.
Well, so I got a grant under a scheme that was mentioned by Richard earlier, the Native Woodland Scheme, the conservation element of it. As Richard rightly said, it's a scheme that's not going to be attractive to any farmers because it would essentially mean the renunciation of income after the first 7 years. So the only people who are going to do it are people who are doing it because they believe it's important, like I did. But to have something like that rolled out in a much bigger way, it needs to be something we need to make it possible for farmers to live from the land without destroying it, and that's presently not the case.
Thank you, Owen. And I think, is table 5's question to follow up on that, Nessa? What's it, Caroline?
Nessa, also from Galway. For Caroline, who owns Merlin Wood, and how does its ownership structure affect your work to conserve and restore it?
Merlin Woods is owned by, it's not actually, it's owned by the people. It's managed by the HSE, and it's managed by the City Council, Galway City Council. So all public land is owned by the people, and we should always remember that. And the City Council and the HSE manage this land for us. So we have a very good relationship with the Parks Department of Galway City Council and the Environment Department. So within councils, you have a lot of different departments, and this is up at government level as well. So you have departments that are doing really, really good work within the City Council and at government level. And then you have other departments that are pulling away from the good work that one department is doing. And you're going, what's going on here? Do these departments not actually speak to each other? We then have the HSE, who there's no management of the woodland apart from the meadows, which is cut. There's 3 meadows, and they're cut, and hay is taken from. So that's the best way for the orchids to survive. There's no grazing there. You know, and people use it, people walk around it, so it's public land that's used. So that's kind of how Merlin Parks is. But the woodlands itself, we do the litter picks, and we do some projects, and then we link in with the City Council on different projects as well.
Sorry, can I just explain? Hold on a second, NASA. I'll let NASA follow up on that.
Sorry, maybe I'm stupid, but I just don't understand what you mean by public land. Is it owned by the council, or is it HSE
public
land?
It's public land. I think people don't.
By the state, or
owned by the state. These are managing public land,
yeah.
And I think people forget that. They go, who owns it? The people of Galway or the people of Ireland own public land.
Yeah.
Just much like Quilcha and all those are managing state land.
Yeah.
It is our land. The people of Ireland.
Oh, I'm not criticising. I just think you're doing.
I'm just saying
job, but
that there's two management companies going on, or 2 managers of the land. if that answers the question for you.
I think it answers it in a way that everything seems muddled. Yeah.
Yes.
But that's not your fault, Caroline.
Yeah,
You're
no.
telling us the state of how things are.
Yeah.
Now, I'm quite conscious that we have heard a couple of times from 8, and we've had 3 questions from 4 as well. But so I just want to see, is there any other people at the back of the room who've been very quiet? Robert at 11. Yeah, thank you.
Just because you asked. For the last, all day today and a couple of other times, a few previous weeks we've been here, we're hearing a lot of frustration and a lot of people going, oh, we can't get this done, we can't get that done. It just seems to be ridiculously hard to get anything done. Nearly every single person we've seen up here has a positive outlook on it. They've got the right intentions, but just don't seem to get anything done. Can you give us one positive thing through your 3 journeys, please? Sorry, this wasn't a question we discussed in the group, but just I can feel the frustration, that's all. One positive thing, please.
Well, I thought my first comment was quite positive, but that to go from the buzz-cut fields and the buzz-cut hedges to just letting it go. Like, I know eventually the big, tall spruce trees will be there, but all through the summer, it smelled amazing, it was buzzing, you could see wildlife going on in this 39,000 seedlings. I find it personally very exciting, even if there are pros and cons to it.
For myself, from Merlin Woods, going from the first time I ever looked it up on the internet, from a dirty, murky woods was the description, was the only description I could find out about it on the internet. There was no pictures, there was nothing. And now if you were to look up Merlin Woods, you'd find pictures and people using it and less litter. So there is a lot of positives about it, really.
I think for me, moving to West Cork in 2009 was a revelation once I developed a relationship with this piece of wildland. And the 2 biggest things, and the two things that bring me the most joy in relating to it are how nature will come back when we stop doing the things that we're constantly doing to stop that happening. It comes back, it comes surging back with great abundance and diversity, and that's a constant cause for great hope for me. Actually, I'll just leave it at that one.
And it's probably a good place to leave it on a positive note. So thanks for bringing us to that, Robert. I want to mention Owen. He's got a new book out called The Irish Atlantic Rainforest. I follow Owen avidly on Twitter, so I'm delighted that he was able to make it up here today. Just to give that perspective, because it is important to include that as well. And thank you sincerely to Andy and to Caroline. And I'm sure, and I'm sorry we didn't get to everybody, and I'm sorry that I'm purposely not going back to people for a second time, but I do want to make sure we try and spread it around the room. We had 19 speakers today. That's a lot of people in. So I want to thank the room for the reception you've given everybody, for the attentiveness, for the engagement, for the excellent questions. So thank you all for that. Thank you to our speakers. Thank you to our facilitators, the hotel. I'll thank everyone properly again tomorrow. For Lisa and Darren on ISL, all the secretariat, Jerry's on sound, our musicians for the bit of a lift as well. Tomorrow we're going to start with the plenary, the kind of mop-up questions that we had from last week, but we're going to shorten the plenary in order to give ourselves some time at the end of the day to start reflecting. And the exercise in reflecting is important because you don't learn without reflecting, and that's some critical reflection on what we're actually talking about and learning. But we're actually going to ask you as well, what kind of solutions do you think are coming out now? And this will be the start of our drafting process. So it feels long away, but at the end of November, we have to have recommendations to vote on. So we have to start drafting them. So tomorrow, it'll be a tentative start to that, just to let you know that's the path we're on. So dinner, I think, is at 7:30. Reception's at 6:45. For those who aren't hanging around, enjoy your evening anyways, and hopefully we'll see you again in the morning. Thanks to our panel for bringing that to us, and hope you have a lovely evening, and we'll see you all again tomorrow. Thanks for everyone tuning online as well.